there, and you'll see it looks like there's a big gouge in the Midwest out there, and Skinwalker Ranch is right in the middle, the bottom of this big bowl that was made out of something that struck the earth a million years ago or more. And why is it that in that location, it seems to be for centuries, and now we know for maybe even thousands of years, due to petroglyphs we found, that people have been seeing weird, crazy things in that location and have been recording it and telling stories about it and handing them down from generation to generation. And it became a topic of serious scientific investigation back in the late 90s with the aerospace entrepreneur Bob Bigelow and the federal government, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But for some reason, this is the nexus, sort of, why the middle of Utah? There's this one spot. There's some of the strangest, craziest things seem to be happening. And we know that it's not just old school stories, campfire spooky stories, because we've seen and measured real scientific data that this is a real thing going on there. And it's something that's gonna, if we ever figure it out, and even if we don't, it's changed how we can look at the universe, because we realize it's much bigger and weirder than we ever thought it was.
Jay, I was wondering if you could talk, again, in a government capacity, and what the ranch was for us. As Travis talked about, we didn't put a lot of money into the ranch. It wasn't a thing that we spent a lot of government money on. Quite the opposite. It was an observatory. So I would go out to the ranch. Like I said, the first trip, first day, I saw something, right? So this is a great place to go take new analysts, folks that are going to be supporting me, out to see something for themselves. Well, I get back from the ranch from my very first trip and realize stuff happening at home. My wife and kids are telling me these crazy stories, and I'm thinking, what? So I'm looking at evidence, and I'm looking at damage, and I'm looking at, something really happened. And I'm calling back to Robert Bigelow and Colin Kelleher, the program managers for our contract, and I'm standing in my front yard looking at a tree that's about this big around, and something just broke. Just stepped on and broke, and you calculate that out, and you're talking 10,000 plus pounds.
Dinosaur.
Right, no, something bigger than a bear. And I'm on the phone, and I just, out of the blue, I said, hey, I think I brought a hitchhiker home. Just made up that term, and that term sticked, and it really does fit. It's when you go to these places, and it's not just Skinwalker Ranch. I've talked to so many first-person witnesses, military pilots, government, special forces, special operators that have had encounters or close-in action near what we call UAP. And some of them come back to me later and say, hey, Jay, ever since I saw that thing, some things have been happening. And they start telling me their stories, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, that's hitchhiker, right? And I explain to them. And it's hard to get your head wrapped around, but there is a potential scientific explanation for these.
Yeah, it's not just like you see, I saw an apparition or something. It's weird stuff. Stuff that's scientifically measurable. Give you a perfect, several times. Since we've been doing this investigation, I put sensors in my house, Jay's house, other people's houses that are involved with it and volunteered. This is like we sneaked in and did it, and we measure all sorts of things: microwaves, radio frequency, acoustic signatures, gamma rays, vibrations, all sorts of things, and constantly running them into a big database. And we don't ever go look at it unless we have some trigger. Say something happened, so we go back and look at that time, and all the clocks are synced and all these things through the internet. And several times there's been simultaneous phenomena happen in Maryland, for example, in Alabama and Utah, all at the same time. And one event I can give you, this is a really weird one. So I have a chicken house on my property at home in Alabama, and my wife called me. I was at work in the off season when I wasn't at the ranch, and she said, "Hey, there's a chicken dead stuck in the door, and I can't get it out. I don't understand." And so I came home. So chickens, they go to bed when it gets dark, and then they're there, and then in the morning they get up. Well, you got to put a door there, or raccoons and other animals go and eat them, because chickens are stupid. They won't move. And so I built this computerized door that is a little sheet of aluminum. We go bzzz, it takes like a minute to close, right? You'd have to be really stupid to get stuck in it. And it also had a contact sensor, so if something touched it, it would stop. And it also had a safety laser eye across the doorway. So if something's in the door, it turns off the power to the thing. Well, I go and I had to literally reverse the battery, cut the wires, and reverse the battery to the lead to get the motor to come up so I could get the chicken out of there. And then I looked at the computer that I set up, and it said this happened at 2:33 a.m. in the morning. Chickens do not move at 2:33 a.m. in the morning. I'm serious. There can be a fox in the hen house and eating the chicken sitting right next to it on the roof, and the chickens will not move. If you know anything about chickens, it's so weird. That chicken got up at 2:30 in the morning and stood there in the middle of the door for a minute to get crushed to death. And something blew out this system. And so I looked at my sensor, and it shows I had a huge burst of microwaves hitting my property at that time, 2:33 a.m. Central Time at that moment. So I called out to the ranch, called Eric, and said, Eric, anything happened at the ranch last night? Because something weird happened at my house. He said, man, I wasn't at the ranch. I'm like, well, where were you? Well, so he was having a date night with his wife, and she's too afraid of the ranch. She won't come to the ranch, so she goes to a hotel in the town that's about 35 minutes away. And so he met her in that town, and he said, but the damnedest thing, when I was trying to get back, the Jeep blew out on me. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, last night, I know this for a fact, because it's when the clock started back on when we finally got power to it. It was at 1:33 a.m. They're on Mountain Time in Utah, right? Which is the same time as 2:33 a.m. in Alabama. And he says, suddenly all the lights on the Jeep lit up, and all the electronics in the Jeep were fried. The entire system, the ignition system, the computer, all the electronic components and the radio and the dash, all of it was shot. Happened simultaneously with when I had the event at my house. That was an electromagnetic event. That's something that we say on the show, that we say a lot. If I was going to make something up, it wouldn't be that. Well, that's kind of the way the ranch has been for us in that regard. We haven't learned what the actual answer is, but we've learned there's umpteen possible answers. And one of the most fun that I kind of, both of us kind of keep sticking to, is that there is an ancient artifact of some sort, say it's a crashed alien spacecraft, that somehow was out of phase and got stuck in the mesa somehow or other, like this thing flew in and out of the mesa. And it's got an artificial intelligence control system. And it used a direct-to-mind connection with its crew. And the crew died in the crash. And the AI keeps reaching out to brains, to consciousnesses, to say, hey, I'm turned on, somebody, change my oil, do this or that. And there's nobody there that is the same kind of brain to connect to. And that's why when people are there, their consciousness are handshaking, like your phone handshaking with your Bluetooth in your car, but it doesn't know the right encryption algorithm or decryption algorithm, and so you're getting weird stuff. Kelleher in his book talks about how one day they saw two guys standing out by the Homestead One, smoking cigarettes, wearing trench coats, and had dog heads. And I always thought that was stupid until I got there and realized, well, that was the perception. Maybe it was so weird, their brains couldn't actually figure out what it was they were seeing, but that's what their brain put together. And that's the kind of handshaking, that if this was that type of solution, that it was some kind of alien or ancient system trying to connect to consciously to a crew, and we're not the same kind of brain it understands how to talk to, we would be getting gobbledygook, and that's what we're seeing. And why are things so damn weird?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the right audience. There's probably Stargate Atlantis fans out there, right? Yeah. So remember the ancient gene.
First time I ever saw Jason Momoa was here in like 2010, I think.
Right? So you get that ancient gene, and no one could fly the craft without that ancient gene, and they figured out a way to create that and make people have the ancient gene. And those are the kinds of things that we have thought about over the years. And you mentioned Colin Kelleher a couple times. And Colin is a PhD, DNA expert, geneticist. We've got other geneticists involved. We're looking at what is that consciousness, what is the common DNA strain that we're looking for to make that.
Why do the local natives seem to interact with it more so than visitors from elsewhere? We seem to have that be a very common thread. So is that like the ancient gene from Stargate Atlantis, right? That allows them to fly the ancient equipment.
Right. And then tie back to movies we were talking earlier. I get to work with a real life buckaroo bonsai. Remember, he drove his rocket truck into the mountain. He went into the 8th dimension. Well, imagine if the rocket truck failed in the middle of that and he's stuck in the mountain.
Yes. That's the exact scenario that we're talking about there, yeah. And so that could be what that is. And one of the things, I'm glad you brought that up, Buckaroo Banzai, because in that scene, he's at table giving the press conference after he drives his truck through the mountain. And he says, you could crush this mountain down to every grain of sand and you wouldn't find this. And he uncovers this container that's got this like alien barnacle thingy that he pulled off of his rocket car. And that he said, because this came from the 8th dimension. So it's possible that whatever's happening inside that mesa is somehow phased out of our dimension in a different dimension, and we might never find it by just digging. It may have to be much more clever than that. We need an oscillation overthruster, apparently.
Well, we've got the